The big international story, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met visiting senior North Korean official Kim Yong-chol. The two officials met for about 90 minutes over dinner. The two high-ranking officials are thought to have discussed next month's potential meeting between President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un. Kim Yong is the most senior North Korean envoy to hold talks with American officials on U.S. soil in 18 years. A U.S. advance team led by the White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations and a delegation headed by a North Korean State Affairs Secretary has also arrived in Singapore to discuss the logistics of the planned summit. The two officials in Singapore are discussing issues like when the various meetings will take place, how much will be open to the press, which officials will be in the negotiating rooms, and how to handle security concerns. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has met his North Korean counterpart Ri Yong-ho in Pyongyang. He said later that denuclearization cannot happen immediately. Sergei Lavrov was personally received by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at the airport. Little in terms of details has been given out on Sergei Lavrov's visit, but the Russian foreign minister has discussed the upcoming summit with the US president in Singapore, among other issues.
I don't believe that the Russians would go as far as discouraging an outcome between the United States and North Korea, because they still have some interest in things working out peacefully, because the faster they can get this resolved, then they can increase their trade. So they have some benefit to go with it as well. But I think they also have some benefit in the status quo.
Let's go live and direct to New York, where Nick Harper now joins us. Thanks so much, Nick, for joining us. There are some reports that suggest that the Secretary of State Pompeo has conveyed to the North Korean official that if denuclearization plans are not going to be discussed, then again possibly the summit may not happen.
Well, it's still very much up for discussion. We know that they had that working dinner last night. We're expecting a full day of meetings to kick off in about 20 minutes' time, somewhere in the region of 4 to 5 hours of meetings before Mike Pompeo comes out to speak to the press to update us all on exactly what has been discussed. But we do know that going into these meetings that Mike Pompeo was very much trying to hold the line, the US position that there has to be a complete denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula, and that quite simply the summit would not take place unless North Korea were to confirm that that is the direction they were aiming for. Mike Pompeo said after last night's dinner that it was a good meeting, that they had done well in what they discussed. We know that they're trying to deal with a whole raft of issues, not just whether or not the meeting will take place, but really trying to iron out all of the logistics, all of the potential content that could be discussed if a meeting takes place. It's unclear whether or not that summit will happen. Remember, President Trump spectacularly cancelled it last week. It's meant to take place on June the 12th. We may get some update from Mike Pompeo later on in the day, whether or not it's on. But for now, it's very much a waiting game to see whether or not that summit is back on the table.
Nick Harper, what's interesting is the North Korean leader's background. Now, here's a person who had sanctions against him imposed by Washington, travel sanctions and other, and here he is in New York on American soil, the first senior official or the senior most North Korean official on US soil in 18 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to bear in mind the spectacular lengths that both countries, North Korea and the United States, are going to make this meeting in New York happen. Kim Yong-chol had been blacklisted by the US. He had to get a special dispensation waiver to be allowed to enter the United States, just so that this meeting could take place. And yes, as you mentioned, we haven't had a high-ranking official of this kind come from North Korea for 18 years, not since 2000, when one of North Korea's top-ranking officials met with then US President Bill Clinton. It is perhaps a suggestion that both sides very much want this summit to happen, and therefore they're happy to facilitate a meeting of this kind in New York, to provide the waivers for this official to travel halfway across the world to meet with the Secretary of State. There is very much this indication that both sides are eager for the summit to take place. They now just need to iron out the details and also confirm that it will be taking place in Singapore. for potentially in a few weeks' time.
Nick Harper, thanks for updating us live from New York.